first, possibly only edition of Talking Georgia Football Talk. I need to revisit that title. But just going to do a quick season preview for the 2018 Bulldogs season here. Just going to go over some key losses, key returning players, new faces, all that kind of good stuff. Give a general prediction of how I think the season will end up. If you like this, please subscribe, and hopefully I can put together some more of these. If you don't, keep your opinions to yourself. Please stay tuned because hopefully we'll be joined by Herschel Walker later. Hopefully. I don't know how to get in touch with him though, and I'm not sure he would show up anyway, so probably not going to happen there, but we'll press ahead anyway. This is sure to be a mildly informative and probably less entertaining look at the season, so I hope you enjoy it. We'll jump right in. Obviously, last season was a huge win for the Bulldogs program. Kirby Smart in his second season really laid the groundwork for what looks like is going to be a really nice run for the Bulldogs over the next, hopefully, 5 to 10 years or maybe even longer. Obviously taking the Dogs to the national championship game, and a couple plays here or there, maybe some more favorable calls might have had things end up differently, but nonetheless, winning the SEC, a huge accomplishment for Kirby and the Dogs last year. So looking ahead to this season, again, we'll jump right in. We'll start with the offense here. I mean, it all starts with the quarterback position for the Dogs, as it does with most teams. And you had Jake Fromm step in when Eason got injured last year. Wishing Eason the best of luck out in Washington. He's got to sit out this year, of course. But Fromm really stepped in, and you heard all camp that this guy was mature beyond his years. Really just an incredible work ethic and a love for the game, and just a natural leader. I don't know if you heard, you might have, that he played in the Little League World Series a few years back. Might have been some mention of that one. But he really did take the reins, and really within a couple of games, you almost couldn't tell he was a freshman out there. Very, very efficient, which is something you don't often see with young quarterbacks. Ended the season 24 touchdowns, only 7 interceptions. But really, depending on what formula you used, he was in the top 10 nationally in QB rating, QBR. So really expecting some great things from him this year. A lot was said about, well, yeah, but can he throw it when he has to? Because you had the stable of running backs last year. Of course, Sony Michel getting drafted in the first round by the Patriots. Nick Chubb going a few spots later in the second round to the Browns. Good luck to you, Nick, there. And, of course, Deandre Swift, certainly, in my opinion, the best third option at running back last year in the country. So he comes back. You lose some leadership for sure in the backfield there, but like I said, Fromm is really probably poised to really head up the leadership role at the QB position this year. So coming back is DeAndre Swift, Brian Herrien, and Elijah Holyfield. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of role they can carve out for themselves this year, because you've got Zamir White and James Cook, both 5-star recruits. A lot of people calling Zamir White a generational running back. Generational seems to come up about every 5 years, so a lot of little kids apparently having children of their own there, if that's 5 years is a generation. But anyway, the cupboard is just loaded. Overall, the running back room is probably every bit as talented as it was last year, if not more. So the question becomes, will Georgia throw the ball more than they did last year? Because you've got Fromm with a year under his belt, you've got an incredible stable of running backs, and then I look to the offensive line. This has been a unit over the years, up until recently, was pretty hit or miss. Not a lot of draft selections out of that unit. Not a lot of size, which is okay if that's what you're going for, a quicker, more mobile unit. But Sam Pittman has done an incredible job of bringing in just absolute monsters at the position and extremely talented. So going down the line, you got Andrew Thomas, who was freshman All-SEC last year, freshman All-American in a lot of cases. He moves from right tackle over to left, and as amazing as it is with Isaiah Wynn getting drafted in the first round, don't expect much, if any, drop-off at that spot. Still tough to make up for the lack of experience, but Thomas, with a full year of starting under his belt, should be pretty solid anchor for the Dogs there. Currently at left guard, you've got Kendall Baker, who just, a lot of people will call him workman-like, yeoman-like. Believe it or not, at 6'6", 305 pounds, he almost is undersized given what we see elsewhere along the line. He's going to be pushed. He's going to be pushed by some freshmen, possibly Jamari Salyer. But I look for him to hold down that spot as a senior. Lamont Galliard, who made the switch from defensive tackle a few years back at center, really just stepped right in. And a lot of people are calling him one of the top centers in the country this year. Again, not overly massive, but at that center spot you often don't find that. So he's looking pretty set right there. Right guard, again, a lot of competition. Solomon Kinley started at that spot last year. Eventually, I don't think he played poorly by any means, but definitely wasn't as stout as he could have been. So you had Big Ben Cleveland come in and start the rest of the way about mid-season. Certainly expecting him to hold on to that spot. And then at the right tackle spot, moving in for the aforementioned Andrew Thomas, looks like it's going to be Isaiah Wilson, just a massive human being, 6'7", 335, that range. But really shed a lot of bad weight. Got a redshirt year under him, so under the tutelage of Sam Pittman, expect a good solid performance out of him this year, barring injury. So getting back to the offensive look, I do think we'll see the ball in the air quite a bit more. The running game is always going to be a staple of Georgia, especially under Kirby Smart. Run, play defense, and take your shots. But you look at that wide receiver core, and I don't think it's a stretch at all to say that this is probably the most talented and deep wide receiver core we've had at Georgia, probably in the history of the program. You just go up and down, and you see, 5-star, high 4-star recruits. And it was just confirmed yesterday, as of filming here, that former 5-star out of Savannah, Demetrius Robertson, was granted eligibility to play this year after transferring from Cal. So you've got him, you've got Terry Godwin, you've got Mecole Hardman, you've got Riley Ridley, on and on and on, and a lot of big athletic, almost project players, Matt Landers, Tommy Bush, to get a lot more size in there. So it's just incredible the amount of talent that has been stocked over the past couple of years, and so just a short time. And lastly, with the tight ends, Isaac Nauta, 5-star, Charlie Werner, extremely athletic for his size. A lot of people have said Chaney's not going to throw to the tight ends. I expect that to change. I really do, because what you had was a young offensive line the last couple of years, and it's tough to have those tight ends going out, for pass patterns over and over when you really need them in to stay in and block, especially against SEC defenses. Just about every team on the schedule is going to have an end or an outside linebacker that can rush the passer. So with the maturity and the talent upgrade at offensive line, I think that will enable Chaney to have those tight ends involved more in the receiving game. So realistically, I think most people would agree that the 2012 Georgia offense, certainly statistically and by all other measures, was the most effective, most explosive that Georgia had ever had. Averaged over 7 yards per play, which is ridiculous. I think there's a good chance we'll see that number go up. I think this could be, for a Georgia program, a record-setting offense this year. From there is such a thing as a sophomore slump. A lot of times that comes from really opposing defenses, kind of getting the book on you. I mean, they watch so much film. They've played you directly, but they've seen so much. Somewhere in there, they're going to find a chink in the armor. And, with Fromm, what is that? I mean, these guys are a lot smarter than I am, so I'm sure they're going to find something. I mean, something he doesn't read as well or pick up on. Certain throws he may not be as adept at throwing. So they're going to try to find out what those are. And we'll see, but I fully expect Fromm to adjust himself, and that sounds kind of weird, but really come on and have a solid sophomore campaign. So we'll see. I mean, it's not going to take a lot to improve on his overall numbers, strictly from the standpoint of, I think we'll see him, putting the ball in the air maybe around 20 times a game. I'm certainly not going to be Baker Mayfield back there, but he's got an offensive line that's going to be able to protect him, and the running game is still going to be there as usual. So overall, look for, dare I say, a dominant Georgia offense. Okay, so moving along to defense for the Dogs in 2018, a lot of key departures to the NFL from this side of the ball as well. Most notably, Roquan Smith, who was everybody's All-American, just like a human heat-seeking missile out there. Just made so many great plays for the Dogs, and probably, definitely will go down in history for Georgia as one of, if not the best, middle linebackers that we've ever had here. So he's gone. That's a key loss. Tough to replace there. Lorenzo Carter and Devin Bellamy provided amazing leadership and really were underrated. I mean, a lot of people thought maybe Lorenzo Carter didn't get the amount of sacks that they would have liked to have seen, but he really wasn't asked to rush the passer down after down. So, obviously a third-round pick to the Giants, that's a key loss. And on the back end as well, Dominic Sanders, you can say what you want about him, but the productivity in terms of interceptions was really astounding. So I think we'll see an upgrade in talent at certain spots, but the experience is tough to replace. And that's really where the question marks lie. It's really not going to be, do the Dogs have enough talent at certain spots? It's how do they come together and mesh as a unit, and can they limit kind of the mistakes that you typically see from people who weren't there down after down for several years. So we'll start with the defensive line. Really an underrated unit last year. You lose Trenton Thompson, you lose John Atkins. Atkins was really kind of an unsung hero of the defense. Wasn't so much a playmaker, but he just really held the point of attack as well as you can expect, and did it for years. So, we'll have to see. I think Julian Rochester steps in. He's got his weight under control. The guy looked like he was about 38 coming out of high school, at least in the face. So he's definitely a mature kid at this point, coming up to be a junior, as is Tyler Clark. Now, Clark is an interesting one because, when he was in there, he really had a knack for just blowing up plays on occasion. So they're going to look for a little more consistency out of him. But, he's a rising junior, so hopefully he is a couple of years in the system and just under the coaching that he's received from Tracy Rocker and now Coach Scott should lead to him being potentially an All-SEC candidate at that one spot. Jonathan Ledbetter comes back. He had some troubles off the field early in his career. Seems to have really righted the ship there, if I can throw out a few extra cliches. And a lot of people are calling for him to be a leader of this defense and potentially an All-SEC candidate as well. So in the 3-4, those are going to be your three main guys, but a lot of depth there. you've got Malik Herring and Mikhail Carter. Daquan Hawkins Muckle seems like he's one of those guys that just seems to have been here for about 8 years at this point, so he'll provide some solid depth as well. So really excited about what we've got going on there. And then the young kids coming in, it's still a little bit up in the air. Some of these guys may end up at end, others may end up at outside linebacker, but Robert Beal, who redshirted last year, got on campus late, also had some injuries, so he's going to be expected to take a step forward. Brenton Cox, another guy that I think will end up at the end. He's super talented, good steal away from Ohio State at the end of the recruiting process. So the future at all those line spots is really in good hands. Will they be spectacular? I don't know, but they definitely will not be a weakness. And you can't be All-American at every single spot, obviously. So I don't think it's something to be concerned about by any means. The linebacker spot, so outside linebackers, your starters project to be DeAndre Walker and Walter Grant. So Walker, a pass rushing specialist for his first few years with the Dogs here. They're going to be counting on him to play a lot more downs, not just go in on passing down situations. But I think he's up to the challenge. He seems to have settled in at kind of the 245, 250 range. Came in at about 220, 225, which you just couldn't put out there against these monster linemen. But with that weight, kept up, I think you'll see him have a big year. Sack-wise, you might be looking at hopefully double-digit sacks for the Dogs, something we haven't seen in a few years. Walter Grant's an interesting one. Some recruiting services were really high on him. Others thought he was just a bit raw, didn't play the best competition. But he came in and he did really well in limited time last year. So, they're going to be counting on him as well to kind of man that Lorenzo Carter spot. You go inside, so Natrez Patrick. It remains to be seen. I don't know if he's going to have to sit out several games or not. Had some off-the-field issues as well. Hopefully he's ready to go and make a go of it his senior year. Very solid. Hasn't been what you would call exceptional to this point, but definitely not a weakness there. And then I'm really excited about Monty Rice. Kirby Smart on multiple occasions has called him a thumper, which is a way of saying the guy can lay the wood. But he's also called him out as being, extremely fast. And that's a combination you don't often see. And the size is there as well, 6'1", 230 pounds. So just a sophomore, but he played a lot of snaps last year, got a lot of good experience. So it'll be interesting to see how he fills Roquan's shoes there. You go back to the secondary, and, a lot of people call out, they're the ones who cost Georgia the national championship game. I mean, yeah, there was that blown coverage at the end. There's no doubt about it. But, there's 100 plays in any given game. So to pin it on that is maybe a little unfair. But nonetheless, I think the return of DeAndre Baker, a lot of people thought he was going to turn pro after last year. Probably would have been, a first through third round pick, maybe, second or third round. True shutdown corner, at least he was last year. So hopefully that continues. He's going to provide a lot of leadership. And at the other spot, it's looking like Mark Webb is going to start at the other corner spot. Switched over from wide receiver early last year and really was coming on. Kirby loves his size, his physicality, as they say. It's not, I don't think, a real word, but and then he got injured, and so that set him back. He basically missed the spring, but he's good to go now. A lot of youth coming in, a lot of 5-star, high 4-star talent again. Tyson Campbell's one to keep an eye on. He'll eventually start pushing for one of those spots. Chris Smith and then Devad Wilson is recovering from a knee injury, but they all look really good. All reports in camp so far. So I think the Dogs are in good shape at corner. At the star, so this is becoming a more and more important position every year. So many teams are lining up 3, 4 wide, sending backs out of the backfield all the time, and just causing a lot of chaos for that secondary. So the star is extremely important. It's looking like a battle between William Poole and Deangelo Gibbs. I hate to bring up a recurring theme, but he had some issues, not 100% what they were. But again, another highly regarded guy that came in and is a sophomore this year. So it'll be an interesting battle there, but plenty of competition, and that's really the key. If you've only got one viable option, then that's who you got to go with. But if you've got 2, 3, 4 guys that are really battling it out, that's what makes all the difference. And so whoever ends up holding down that spot, you might even see some changes made mid-season. We'll see, but should be in good shape there. And then at the safety spots, J.R. Reed comes back, gave us more than we really ever expected when he transferred from Tulsa. He's Deangelo Gibbs' cousin, son of Jake Reed, former NFL wide receiver. Very, very solid. We'll see if he can become more of a playmaker back there this year. Of course, last year was his first season playing with the Dogs. But what's really, along with Monty Rice, the really intriguing thing for me is to see how Richard LeCount does. He's not the biggest guy at the safety spot, 5'11", 180, 185 pounds, but definitely one of the most talented players we've had back there in quite some time. Supremely athletic, isn't afraid to hit you at all. Very, very quick. It's kind of funny to hear Kirby talking about him, because he's one of those guys that just gets called out on every other press conference, and Kirby says, don't make a thing of it, so I won't. But he just seems like if he can just put it all together mentally, understand that he's responsible for certain areas on the field, certain coverages, and not try to make the play every time, he's gonna be a good one. So overall, defensively, it's really just a question of not talent, not depth. Those things are perfectly fine. Just can this unit come together, kind of mesh as a unit, and really, if they do, there's no reason to think this unit won't be every bit as good or even better than they were last year. So that's kind of what I'm looking at on the defensive side of the ball. I know nothing earth-shattering, but I'm expecting this to be a side of the ball that really comes together as the year goes on. So we'll see how that aligns with the schedule. So moving along to special teams. So we'll kind of breeze through this real quick. As far as kicking duty, so obviously Rodrigo Blankenship going to be handling the kickoffs and field goals. Was just a touchback machine last year, which was really a breath of fresh air for the Dogs after a lot of, I guess, angular kicking. Trying to pin teams back. It's just get it through the end zone, and let's go to work on defense. And then no stranger to making big kicks under pressure. You think of the kick right before halftime against Oklahoma, that was key in mounting a comeback there. And then, even though it didn't ultimately matter, the overtime possession for Georgia in the national championship game, Georgia had lost some yardage there, and really would have been probably over on the spot. Again, didn't matter, but made a big 50-plus yard field goal to at least give the Dogs a real shot there. You never really know with field goal kickers. I mean, they tend to be head cases from time to time. Guy can be an All-American candidate one year, and then all of a sudden he just can't hit the broadside of a barn the next. So you have to allow for that possibility. I've seen it before, but there's nothing that leads you to think that that's going to happen with Blankenship. So good hands there. Georgia also brought in another grad transfer. So you remember last year we had Cam Nizelik, who just performed exceptionally well for his 1 year here. So the Dogs brought in Landon Stratton. They also brought in one of, if not the top-rated punters out of high school in Jake Camarda. So just the competition there is huge. I mean, that's a recurring theme. When you build this kind of talent and depth, you just want competition at every spot, so nobody feels safe everybody's pushing as hard as they can, doing everything they can to improve. And so I look for Camarda to win that spot because he's obviously a freshman. You'd love to get him going early, but Stratton's going to provide some good competition there, and we'll see who wins that one. In the returning duties, so punting, you look for Mecole Hardman, possibly Akil Crumpton. Same for kickoffs. Might even see Demetris Robertson, might see James Cook. There's really just no shortage of talent, though, and they'll probably rotate it around depending on the situation as well. And we'll see who ultimately wins out, but it's not a stretch to call for multiple kickoffs and or punts returned for touchdowns this year. Again, the depth of talent is staggering on this team. So moving into the schedule and how that shakes out. So if you've read anything about Georgia's schedule this year, you've probably read that it's a soft schedule. Primarily, there's no big out-of-conference opponent. So last year, obviously, we had the trip to South Bend, which is always a chore in and of itself. But really and truly, you never know what to expect. Notre Dame was coming off, I think, a 4-8 schedule, or a 4-8 record the year before. And, lo and behold, it was a tough game. Dogs pulled it out, and several weeks later, everybody was saying that was a signature win for the Dogs because Notre Dame was beating a lot of good teams. They ended up ranked in the top 25. So you can't sit there and say, hey, Georgia's schedule is absolutely weak. But going into it, you can see why people will poke some holes in it. I don't think anybody's really expecting Florida to take a major jump forward. I mean, I certainly would expect them to make a bowl at least this year under first-year coach Dan Mullen. Tennessee, I really don't see as being a problem, especially at home. They are really in a bad spot right now, and we'll see if Pruitt can turn that around at all. But if you look, you do see some potential pitfalls for the Dogs, not because the Dogs are not a better team overall, but look, it's at any given Saturday, so they're not going to have any trouble with Austin Peay, obviously, but in week 2, could be a potentially tough trip for the Dogs to Columbia. Now, the thing to keep in mind is this is not Richt's Georgia team, and not to get into anything bad-mouthing Richt or anything like that, but for whatever reason, South Carolina in particular was really a thorn in Richt's side in the team, or at least the teams that he coached. Many a time they were one of the blemishes on our schedule. Just really had a tough time with the Gamecocks on any given year. I'm not seeing that this year. I just think the Dogs are just exceedingly talented. I think that going to Columbia, you might see this game be close for a half or so. They do get Deebo Samuel back from an injury last year, who's certainly one of the most dangerous wide receivers in the country. But to counter that, you lose Hayden Hurst, who was I believe the first tight end taken in the draft last year. So that could be a potential, like I said, pitfall for the Dogs. The trip to Missouri. No reason we should lose this game. However, they're one of those teams that just has a puncher's chance. Drew Lock, they just throw it all over the field. You saw last year, they really didn't put any methodical drives together, but they hit a couple of deep balls, and it took a while for the Dogs to shake them loose and eventually pull away. Going down to Jacksonville, like I said, I do think Florida will be better prepared, a little bit better coached, but especially on the offensive side of the ball, they just haven't had the amount of talent, particularly at the quarterback position, that they had in years past under, of course, Spurrier and certainly Urban Meyer. But you can't just say, oh, that's an automatic win. Going to LSU, if I had to pick one game that would be the potential loss for the Dogs, just not showing up as they're going to show up prepared, but you don't always have your A game. That's going to be a tough one. I don't recall if the game time had been set yet. Probably not. So it's at least going to be a 3:30 game, but they seem to find a way to play a lot of big night games there in Baton Rouge. So that's going to be a tough one. They may not be the best team overall, but there's a lot of individual talent on that team, and it's just a tough place to play. I certainly would call for the Dogs to win, in the here and now. But again, if you had to pick a game that's really going to be a challenge, that might be it. And then of course Auburn comes to Athens this year. Really put it on the Dogs last year. It was, Dogs were winning for a while and it was close for a while, and then the wheels kind of came off there, and fortunately Dogs got revenge in the SEC championship game. But that's certainly not going to be a gimme either. So from there you start to say, well, some of the teams that you think are going to be good, some of them always end up not being good, and then there's always a few surprises. So it's always interesting. That's why every season is different, and that's something you can't predict. If I had to guess, I don't see any single game where I say that's a loss for the Dogs, so I'm not going to pick one in particular, but it's just so hard. All these guys are talented that you're playing. They all pay their coaches millions of dollars a year to build winning programs. So I'm assuming an 11-1 regular season for Georgia, possibly LSU, possibly Auburn. I don't think the Dogs will let South Carolina derail their season. So with that said, that would mean an undefeated SEC East record, which would mean a trip to the SEC championship game in this scenario. From there, of course, the odds-on favorite is Alabama. I mean, even though they didn't make it last year, you gotta say it's them. And it's just I got to see how the season plays out. I'm not prepared to say yes we'll win, yes no we won't win. A lot of football to be played, but just as a general overall prediction, I do like the Dogs' chances to get back to the college football playoffs, and that's all you want is a fighting chance. You just got to win two at that point. So that's really all I have for right now. Sorry if this ran a little long. If you're still watching, thank you. Or maybe you fast forwarded to the end. Try and put together some actual game previews from time to time. Won't be nearly as long as this one. And who knows, maybe I will get Herschel Walker to show up. Probably not. It's wishful thinking. Anyway, thanks for watching. Again, please subscribe. This was my first one, so sorry for all the rambling. Hopefully it made a little bit of sense, and we'll see you next time.